Welcome back. As the US-Israeli war on Iran reshapes the geopolitical map of the Middle East, attention is shifting towards a quieter but no less influential actor, China. For years, Beijing has been Tehran's economic lifeline, its largest oil buyer and a crucial partner in bypassing sanctions. Yet today, as the conflict intensifies, China's response appears strikingly restrained. China, Tehran's largest oil buyer and long-standing economic partner, has chosen a path of calculated restraint. Why has Xi Jinping remained largely silent? Is this neutrality a sign of strategic caution or reflection of deeper priorities, economic stability, economic and energy security, and the delicate management of relations with Donald Trump ahead of a critical moment in global diplomacy? With a potential meeting on the horizon between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump, is China quietly shaping the outcome from behind the scenes or simply protecting its own interest? Let us continue with our special coverage now with the most recent updates on the global escalating crisis. China's response to US and Israeli strikes on Iran highlights a careful strategic balance between partnership and pragmatism. While Beijing remains Iran's primary economic lifeline, particularly as a major buyer of its oil, it has avoided direct confrontation, instead calling for de-escalation. This restraint reflects China's broader priorities, maintaining stable relations with Washington ahead of high-level talks and safeguarding global trade flows. At the same time, the conflict indirectly serves US interests, as rising oil prices and market volatility can strengthen Washington's leverage in global energy politics. Beijing's muted stance suggests it is less willing to jeopardize its economic stability for Tehran, raising questions about the limits of their alliance in times of crisis. US President Donald Trump has delayed his planned summit with Chinese leader Xi Jinping by several weeks, citing the need to remain focused on the escalating war in Iran. The meeting, originally scheduled for late March, is now expected to take place in 5 or 6 weeks, as Washington prioritizes managing the conflict and securing vital oil routes, particularly the Strait of Hormuz. The postponement disrupts a high-stakes agenda that included trade negotiations, Taiwan, semiconductors, and rare earth supply chains. However, the delay may ultimately benefit Beijing. With the US increasingly absorbed in the Middle East, China has accelerated diplomatic outreach and economic initiatives, positioning itself as a stable global partner while expanding influence across regions such as Africa and Europe. Overall, the Iran war is reshaping global priorities, diverting US attention and potentially giving China strategic breathing room ahead of any future Trump-Xi meeting. European Union leaders have convened in Brussels amid mounting concern over the impact of the Iran war on global energy supplies, particularly natural gas. The conflict has disrupted key production sites and threatened vital transit routes such as the Strait of Hormuz, through which a significant share of global gas flows. As a result, European gas prices have surged sharply, exposing the bloc's heavy dependence on imported energy. At the summit, leaders focused on short-term measures to cushion the economic shock, including tax cuts, subsidies, and state aid for households and industries. However, divisions remain over how far to intervene in energy markets and whether to adjust climate policies. While rejecting direct military involvement, EU leaders emphasized de-escalation and long-term strategies to reduce reliance on fossil fuels and enhance energy security.
The situation in the region is extremely serious. It is causing great instability, suffering.
Now, China's position in the current war is as complex as it is consequential. For years, Beijing has been Iran's economic lifeline, buying its oil, sustaining its trade, and offering a buffer against Western sanctions. Yet today, as missiles fall and tensions escalate, China's voice remains notably restrained. The silence, however, does not necessarily imply disengagement. Behind the scenes, China continues to navigate a delicate balance, maintaining its strategic partnership with Tehran, while avoiding direct confrontation with Washington and safeguarding its own economic trajectory in an increasingly unstable global environment. At the same time, the anticipated engagement between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump casts a long shadow over Beijing's calculations, raising questions about whether global diplomacy is quietly shaping the course of this war. So how should we interpret China's actions, or lack thereof? And what does this reveal about the future of alliances in a shifting world order? To unpack this, we are joined from Washington by Peter Roth, who is a contributing editor at Newsweek. Thank you very much for being here with us. And from Hong Kong, Marvin Lee is joining us, geopolitical analyst. Thank you very much for being here on the program. Peter Roth, how is China's muted response being interpreted within the policy circles in Washington?
Good to be with you. I think China's muted response is exactly what's expected. The Chinese are sitting back and waiting to see what happens. They have security and commercial gains potentially on both sides here. You know, they buy Iran oil. They buy Iran oil cheap. On the other hand, they have extensive trade relations with the United States, and they can lever either relationship to their own advantage. And so they're sitting back and they're waiting and they're watching and they're making determinations about what they are going to do while the United States pursues a policy that, while to the benefit of global security, creates intense upward pressure on energy prices.
And Marvin Lee, in China, how is China's position and relationship with Iran being seen right now? Are people expecting China to do more?
Thanks for having me. From China's strategic perspective, the conflict is being framed as a dangerous regional crisis with global consequences. Beijing sees it not simply as a local war, but as something that could destabilize energy flow, maritime trade, inflation, and the wider international order caused by the United States of America, obviously. And as I have agreed, the gentleman from America has just said, China is sitting back and would like to gain lots of diplomatic and economic gain from this regional conflict. Because from President Xi Jinping and the Chinese people, we believe that we did not set this war, and we are not going to collaborate with the United States of America and President Donald Trump to de-escalate the regional conflict here, because we have been taking a very tough tariff war, technological confrontation against this country. So why should we collaborate with this big bully in the West, in the global North?
Okay, Peter Roth, coming to you. We know that Moscow is on maneuvers in Iran and helping the Iranians with this war. What about Beijing? Does Washington see Beijing as a neutral actor in this, or is it a silent enabler of Iran?
It's a not so silent enabler of Iran at the moment, as the main purchaser of Iranian crude in violation of global sanctions. China is funding Iran's ability to defend itself and to make war on its neighbors. So it's not, they don't play a passive role at all here. That gives them tremendous leverage. Just as the Russians likewise have some leverage here, even though they are, you'd expect a much stronger expression of Russian support for the regime in Tehran, save for the fact that Russia is bogged down in Ukraine and has its own problems. I think China is sitting back again and looking at this saying, oh, well, the United States has a Ukraine problem of its own. It started a war that it thought it would win easily and doesn't necessarily want to be in over a protracted period of time. It's not clear that the United States is winning. It's not clear that the United States is losing, despite what the White House has been saying. The argument, though, is that the essential mission to destroy Iran's ability to obtain a nuclear weapon and to degrade or destroy its ability to make war on its neighbors and on its own people is proceeding apace. Iran's response is what's driving the increase in global energy prices because they are attacking energy production sites among their neighbors. They're trying to close the Strait of Hormuz. But that risks bringing the Arab world into this war alongside the United States in a way that secures freedom of energy, like the U.S. Navy sitting in the Persian Gulf right now to try and secure freedom of the seas.
Marvin Lee, would you say that, given what Peter was just saying there, would you say that Russia and China are having a good war compared to the United States and Israel?
First of all, China has not declared war on anyone, and China is a very peaceful country that we can see, even though we have a really powerful military here. However, Beijing is not silent. I believe that they are doing some backdoor diplomacy, and there is a special diplomatic team from China. They have been negotiating with lots of diplomats in Saudi Arabia and even the Gulf countries recently. China has publicly called for immediate stop to military operations, warned against chaos, and confirmed that the special envoy, Mr. Zheng, is conducting mediation effort in the region. And we have the 5,000 years of Chinese history, and we are really familiar that this the so-called the false flag campaign, and some countries have already kickstarted the war, and they believe that this is your fault and this is not my fault. So that's why China is sitting back and busy focusing their own economy and focusing on the collaboration with the global south, for example, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Central Asia, Africa, rather than get involved in this war. I don't think we have any intention to get deeply involved like America has been doing.
And Peter Roth, you mentioned there China and their continued purchases of Iranian oil, undermining U.S. sanctions, perhaps. But what do you make of the news from the White House that Trump is planning to lift Iran's sanctions on oil?
Well, they're planning to lift the sanctions on the oil that's already on tankers. And that, I admit, is confusing. It's confusing to me. It's confusing, and I'm supposed to understand what's going on. But basically, the White House is doing whatever it can right now to keep the spot price of energy down, to export all of the crude that's out of the ground, that's ready to be refined, that's ready to be pumped into economies. I think that the extent of the price shock was not anticipated by the White House. I think they thought they'd have stronger production out of the United States, potentially stronger production out of Venezuela with Maduro being gone. But we know now that the Venezuelan oil facilities are in far worse shape than we expected. And we're looking for ways to make up the potential gap. It hurts the United States. It hurts our Western allies even more, which is, again, puzzling as to why they're not more vocal about wanting to come to assistance in keeping the Strait of Hormuz open. But right now, every bit of oil that's out of the ground, sitting in a tanker waiting to be sold, is going to find a willing buyer.
And Peter Roth, staying with you for a second, were you surprised that the White House had not foreseen this situation and the Strait of Hormuz being closed? I mean, it's basically been the warning that every president has had for decades, has it not? And it's why they haven't gone into Iran before.
I think there are plenty of reasons they haven't gone into Iran before. The Strait of Hormuz is a small one. And I do think that the White House was confident in its ability to keep it open. I do think they have a plan for reopening it, and we'll see that executed over the next several weeks. So again, when they say this is a short-term concern, at this point, I see nothing that tells me it's not.
Okay. Marvin Lee, how important is Iran to China in terms of long-term geopolitical and economic plans for China?
This is a very good question. Iran matters to China for three reasons here: energy, geopolitical reasons, and strategic balance. Economically, Iran remains important because China is heavily dependent on import oil all around the world, especially from Russia, Saudi Arabia, and of course Iran, buying cheap oils from Iran as well, which imports reaching almost 12 million barrels per day in 2025. Even though China has tried to raise domestic output and diversify supply by supporting its EV car industry. Geographically, Iran sits near one of the most critical maritime choke points in the world, the Strait of Hormuz. And strategically, Iran gives China influence in a region central to Eurasian connectivity and global energy markets. And a few years ago, China helps like the reconciliation between Saudi Arabia and Iran, like as a mediator. So that's why so could I say Iran is really important to China? I would not say 100% yes, because every country, including the United States of America, is also important for China, because China is open for market and open for collaboration.
Okay, Peter Roth, coming back to you, we mentioned Russia providing intelligence and strategic support for Iran in this war. Is there any evidence that China is providing indirect support of this kind?
If there's any evidence of it, I haven't seen it.
Okay. And Marvin Lee, do you think China can realistically balance its partnership with Iran while maintaining its relations with the United States? Is this going to be an interesting meeting coming up?
China will certainly try, but it's becoming harder. Beijing's basic formula is to keep ties with Iran, preserve relations with the Gulf countries, especially Saudi Arabia, and avoid direct strategic confrontation with Washington in the Middle East. China's official language emphasizes sovereignty, non-interference, and political settlements. So in layman terms, China has zero intention to intervene or change internal politics or religion in this region. But every topic all around the world, for example, the relationship between China and Japan, China and South China Sea, China and Taiwan, and even the ongoing war in this region in the Middle East is actually can be categorized as an extended topic between USA and China, because we are at the Cold War 2.0. President Xi Jinping and Chinese people believe that is a unique opportunity for China to focus on its economy and have more upper position during the upcoming diplomatic talk with USA or even in a global world.
And Peter Roth, what do you expect to see come out of this meeting when it happens in 5 or 6 weeks' time between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping? And what do you make of their relationship? Because Donald Trump he's been hot and cold, hasn't he, as he is sometimes with world leaders, but he seems to like him.
I think you're going to see something that Trump's going to be able to point to and say it's been a tremendous victory. Not because it necessarily is, but because he needs one politically and geostrategically. He needs to come out of this meeting looking like we have moved the US China alliance forward, that we have better agreement now on trade issues, that the tensions between our two nations are eased, so that he can devote more time to the war in the Gulf and hopefully have some support from China, at least on the issue of keeping the Strait of Hormuz open.
Yeah, Marvin Lee, is it true that the Strait of Hormuz is open for Chinese ships and Russian ships?
Uh, I'm not surprised if it's open for the Chinese maritime business because there's a historical lessons here a few years ago. There was a very unstable situation along the Red Sea, and lots of cargo ships label themselves as all China cruise, China maritimes or Chinese ship, which basically signals that China has a very positive relationship, like not just with Saudi Arabia and Iran, with every stakeholders, including Israel. However, the United States of America has lots of potential enemies in these regions. So when there is a peaceful world, the world doesn't need China. When there is a world of chaos, everyone needs China to stabilize the economy, to stabilize the global order. So from my perspective, this is hilarious.
And Peter Roth, do you think the US might put pressure on China more directly to curtail its economic ties with Iran, or has that ship sailed?
No, I think that pressure on China to curtail its relationship with Iran is very much on the table, particularly if we can find alternatives. The Chinese don't care where they get their oil, they care about how much they pay for it. And if we can help them find cheaper energy, we can sell it to them as cheaply as they're getting it from Iran. I don't think they care where they get it from. I just think they need to have it.
Okay. And Marvin Lee, how does this conflict fit into China's broader vision of reshaping global order? Does this war reinforce China's push towards a multipolar world order?
Definitely is yes for China, both in political terms, diplomatic terms, and even economic terms. Because when other countries, including Germany, UK, France, has been paying a very expensive electricity bills because of this regional conflict, actually China has different alternative measures to alleviate these kind of potential rise of oil price, because we have lots of EV cars, we have lots of renewable energies, even though the percentage is quite small at the moment, and we have been buying and storing million barrels of crude oil underneath of the mountains, like within the Chinese territory, and we have been getting lots of cheap oils, of course, but at the same time, we have a term called uh, negative electricity bill in China because of our long-term vision here, unlike USA, and we have a stable electricity supply within the Chinese territory, which means we have more bargaining chip to talk with other countries, especially with USA here. And I believe that President Donald Trump would like to use the so-called the crude oil, the expensive crude oil to bargain with China. And let's see if he has luck to talk with China, because China has been buying lots of crude oil from Russia through the pipeline from the far east of Russia to China and even Central Asia. So that's why and in a more, and of course from the moral high ground, it seems that China is sitting back, but at the same time, I have been talking with lots of colleagues and connections in the Middle East. They would like to see China as a peacemaker more than a troublemaker because of this regional conflict. Because the people from the Gulf countries, they have been paying paying the USA for security. However, it's not the case. So I think this is a critical moment for the Gulf countries, the rich oil countries, to begin shifting from uh, from from the west to the east, especially China. But like this has been happening a few years ago already.
Okay. Peter Roth, coming to you now. And, you know, America is the world's only superpower. It's the most powerful army that's ever been on the face of the earth. But has this war exposed some of America's limitations?
No, I don't think so. This is a limited war. This is not a war against the Iranian people. This is not a war for territory. This is not a war for power and glory. This is not an expansionist war. This is defensive, as hard as that may be for some people to understand. Iran has been at war with the United States since 1979. They routinely march in the streets shouting death to America. This current president of the United States chooses to take them at their word and has decided to do something about it that goes far beyond what most other presidents have chosen to do. He has destroyed their capacity to enrich uranium. Now he's trying to seize the enriched uranium they have, stop them from assembling nuclear warheads, stop the development of their ballistic missiles so they can't shoot them at Israel or at Doha or at Ankara or at Riyadh or Cairo or Berlin, and that they can't ever develop intercontinental ballistic missiles where they can hit Washington or Miami or New York. This is being accomplished. If we wanted to roll American troops into Iran like they were rolled into Iraq, this would be a different conversation. Donald Trump doesn't want to do that. Donald Trump wants a precise, targeted assault on their war-making capacity. That's what's going on. This is it's not an economic war. It's not a war against the population. It's against the war-making capacity of the regime. That takes time. That takes effort. It takes precision. And it takes a high tolerance for risk and pain. And I will say that Donald Trump has a higher tolerance for risk than most contemporary politicians in the United States or around the world. And so the increase in the price of oil, what appear to be the setbacks in that there isn't any further progress. If you talk to the defense professionals that I do, the objectives are being achieved day by day, week by week. The leadership of the various power structures are being taken out.
And Peter, before we have to finish, I'm afraid. But before we go, boots on the ground. Are we going to see that?
You're not going to see it like you saw it in Iraq or Iran or Afghanistan.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much indeed, gentlemen, for joining us here on Qnews. Peter Roth in Washington and Marvin Lee in Hong Kong. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us here on the program. Now, as this day ends, the conflict has moved beyond limited strikes into a broader, more dangerous confrontation affecting energy routes and global markets. With escalation intensifying and the diplomacy narrowing, the key question now is how far it will go and whether it risks becoming a prolonged war with global consequences. Stay with us for continued updates, and you can join us on social media 24 hours a day for more. Stay tuned for more from us here at Qnews. Have a good day.